Alright, this video is probably going to be a little bit on the longer side, and I may have to cut in and out a bunch. I've got a pile of dogs over here that like to bark every time something walks by the window, but we'll get through it. So why am I doing this one? I originally fell in love with the idea of the Storaxa, or just the small home server, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago now, when they launched that thing. And since that's no longer coming to fruition, I decided to kind of take matters into my own hands here and build just a smaller, more power efficient server. I've got an HP DL380P generation 8, I think it is, humming along in the basement, but it's pulling almost 300 watts of power just continuously. So that's costing, I don't know, 35, 40 bucks a month just to run that thing, which is a little excessive. So now with this much more power efficient Intel 13th gen, it should be way cheaper to run, and just, smaller form factor, prettier. I can actually leave this thing in my office now if I want to, now that it's all set up. So I just want to walk through everything. So I'm going to go through everything from why I chose Truenas versus Proxmox. I spent 48 hours trying to get Proxmox to work, and I'm a fairly nerdy person, and it was just a nightmare for me. I couldn't get anything to it didn't just work. You had to kind of tinker with it. It reminded me of back in the day when I got my first Android phone. It was like, yeah, you can tinker with everything, versus handing your iPhone to your grandmother. Stuff just kind of works. So to me, that's the benefit of Truenas here. I'm not going to cover like the basic formatting of your USB drive to get the operating system of Truenas onto your computer. I can do that in a separate video. When I get a couple more disks and I do another bay, I can set up a quick video on how to add another VDEV, because I plan on doing that. So at least you'll have some idea there. But there's tons of videos on that. What I really want to cover here is, once you've got Truenas installed, I want to cover the shares and all of the apps. So your traditional R stack or suite, whatever you want to call it. So how to manage your movies through Radarr, your TV series through Sonarr, your music through Lidarr. If you're into books, so we can go over Readarr, but also things like indexer management on Prowlarr, and then media requests through requestrr and Overseerr. I also want to touch on launcher screens. So we've got Homarr in there, and then UseNet providers. So how to set them up, and a NewsNab downloader. So we're going to go over SAB there. Then media playback. I'm going to go over how to configure Plex and Jellyfin, and then my absolute favorite new app that I found. I was searching for a long time for a photo backup app. So I found one that is very, very similar to Google Photos. It's called Immich. So stay tuned for that one. And if you're just tuning in for that, it's very powerful. It's under very active development, so I'm sure there's going to be even more features by the time you get it implemented. But as of now, it's got facial recognition, AI search, and it's so smooth and seamless. So we've launched it here in the house for multiple users, and it is just absolutely fantastic. So we'll get into how to set up everything, all of your settings. And as a bonus, we'll probably go over Tailscale as well, just so you guys can see how to VPN into all of this, so you can access all of this safely and securely without having to expose everything to the open internet and be prone for hacking or anything like that. So without further ado, we'll get right into it. Okay, so here we are at our dashboard when we first log in. So you can see I'm on Truenas Scale 23.10.1.3. And this is the end of February 2024. You can see I've got my 13th gen Intel i5 13500. I've got my pool already set up, so I've got 96 terabytes, which once you put that in RAID Z1 yields you like 65 terabytes of usable storage, and then you get that single drive failure redundancy. So moving right along, we've got our storage tab along the left hand side. You can see I've got my single RAID Z1 with 5 disks, 13.37 tebibytes, which yields 65.25 tebibytes total. So you can see that's set up and healthy. The next step is to go to data sets. So once your pool is established, you have to create some data sets to actually store the data on. So you'll see here I've got 2. This IX applications, that one will be automatically created by Truenas once you start installing apps. The one we've got to focus on right now is this one called media. So you can see next to it I've got SMB and NFS shares already set up. And then I've got the permissions, which you probably can't see because my face is in the way. You've got permissions set up down here. So you can see this, whenever I've got an issue, it's because I don't have just kind of full open access set up and all the apps can't read, write, and execute like they should. So I'm going to go through just adding another data set here as if it were the first time. So I'm just going to call this one test. So we're going to add a data set. I'm going to call it test. We're going to leave everything just as it is. And we're going to hit save. That created this new data set for us down here. So as you can see, it's only read, write, execute for the root folder. So what we've got to do is, now we've got this highlighted, go into edit our permissions. And then here, since we want our apps to be able to do everything, I'm going to set apps as our owner. Now this is a built-in user. And I'm going to do the same for the group. We're going to apply the user and apply the group because otherwise it won't save any of the changes. We're going to select, make sure everything is selected here under read, write, and execute. And then we're going to hit this set ACL for our access control. And we're going to select a preset here, and all we're going to do is select open. We want this sucker wide open. We're not going to expose this thing to the internet at all, so we don't have to worry about any hackers coming in and getting us or anything like that. So once we select that, you can see it says read, write, execute for every group here. And then we're going to apply permissions recursively, confirm, continue, and then save our access control list, or our ACL. So what that did for us is it got us our read, write, execute over here in this bottom right hand corner for everything. So we know it's wide open, so we know all of our apps are going to be able to talk to it. So once that's done, we can go over to shares. So you see how this doesn't have, our new one doesn't have those SMB and NFS shares next to it. That's in this next tab down called shares. So here I've got set up our path here, the Yoda pool, and just a generic media folder. So all you've got to do is set that up similar and hit save. So let's see if we can add one for our test. So our mount point, and we'll just select test now. Hit save. Restart the service. Boom, it's that easy. Now we've got our new data set in here. Again, I like to just call mine media, so I'm going to trash all this when I'm done with it. But same thing here. You can do the same thing for your Linux or Unix shares, and then we're good to go there. Now everything should be able to talk to everything, and when you pull up your File Explorer and you go down to your network and you select Truenas, see, I've got my existing media, and then I've got our brand new data set test with nothing in it, and if all goes well, I should be able to make another folder in here called test. Beautiful. I've got write access to it, and I'll put a open up our document here. Awesome. Save it, close it, and then when we open that bad boy back up, perfect. So we know that that is all working well. We've got our shares set up, and everything should be good to go for the next step. Now the part everybody's looking forward to, getting to the apps. So the very first thing when you open up the apps, you'll see it's a much different layout than the older versions where it was kind of a tile card for each one. But you'll see all of my services running here. You won't see any of this. You'll see a blank screen. And the first thing that you've got to do is go all the way up in this top right and hit Discover Apps. And then you'll see you'll only have about 100 or so because it's only the Truenas sponsored apps. So the ones that'll say Truenas underneath it here. So what you've got to do is you've got to add an additional catalog. So go to Manage Catalogs, Add Catalog, hit Continue, and then you're going to add TrueCharts. So you're just going to type in TrueCharts right here, and then the repository you're going to type in https://github.com/TrueCharts catalog, and I will just put that down in the description so you can copy and paste that in there. Leave it as stable and main, hit save, and then you'll see you've got this TrueCharts in here. That's going to take a while to load. Depending on your internet connection and your computer, it might take, I don't know, 10 minutes to actually load all those applications. Then when you go into Discover Apps, you'll have to hit refresh, and you'll see this number pop up to 820 or so as they get added. From that point on, you can add filters to see one or the other or both, and then you can just start searching for apps that you want to add. So that's what I've done to get all of my applications. I just kind of search for them because I know the names of them. It used to be a little easier to scroll through. Now it's just kind of they try to put them in bundles here of what's going on. Good, bad, or indifferent. It's cool. You'll be able to find what you need with all the information in this video. So now that we've got our catalog set up, the very first one that we're going to install is one called SAB. So the full name is SABnzbd, which is SAB NewsNab Downloader. So when you go to set this up, you're just going to find it in your Discover Apps, search for it, add an application, and when you are setting it up, there's only a couple of things that you've got to do. So obviously you've got to name it, set your time zone, or don't, just default it to Los Angeles like apparently I did here. Really, with the majority of these apps, all you're going to have to do is when you get down to the storage section, all you're going to have to do is add that data set that we just added. So even down here, you're going to have to search for additional app storage. So this is where you want your downloads to go, essentially. So for the type of storage, you're going to click this drop down until you get to host path. You are then going to say, what is the host path? So where do you want it to go on this pool? So I have mine directed towards the mount point, the pool that I created, and then that media share that I created up in the datasets tab just moments ago with you. So once you have that media selected, you then have to define a path for it in this actual app. So most apps have a media folder already with a lowercase m. Just so I can differentiate, I do all mine with a capital M. It doesn't much matter. It'll shoot it in there wherever you tell it to, and it'll kind of act like it's its direct path into that location. So once that is done, that's really all you've got to do for this. You'll hit save or launch. Mine says update here. I didn't change anything, so I'm not going to update it. And then you'll be able to click on the actual app, see that it's once it goes from deploying to running, and then you'll be able to click open. At that point, it's going to walk you through a first time setup where you'll set the language, and then after you set the language, one of the first thing it's going to ask you to do is add your NewsNab server. So I've actually got two of those. I've got Thunder News and UseNet Farm. I set these up years and years ago. I'm sure it's still the same, but the rationale was you have kind of an unlimited account for the majority of the things that you're downloading. And then you've got a block account. If one or two articles are missing, you can go to that secondary block account and just download a little bit. So I pay for one through Thunder News, which is $5.25 a month right now. It was $3 a month for years and years for me. But, you know, inflation, whatever, they raised that rate a little bit, which I still think is very reasonable for the reliability I get out of them. Again, I'm not sponsored by them. It's just what I personally use. And then the UseNet Farm, I buy a kind of a block account, and it's like $20 for, I think, a terabyte. And I've needed to do that 2 or 3 times over the last 6 or 7 years that I've had them set up. So it's not a whole lot. It's not a huge investment. So I'm going to go over those, but I'm going to move my face a little bit to block my login credentials here. So bear with me. Okay, so here we've got my face kind of blurring out my login credentials. But once you get in, this is the Thunder News. The important thing that you'll need is right down here, and it's going to be different for different providers, but you'll need the actual server address. So for the US, this one is secure.us.thundernews.com. That's all you'll really need. In addition to, you can't see it, I've got a username and a password up behind my face here. So you'll need both of those, and you'll put those into NZB, and then you can test your settings, and it'll show you that you've got a good connection. So now I've clicked over to the NZB configuration, the servers tab, and again you'll see something similar to this. You've got your host, so this is that server address that we just put in, that secure.us.thundernews.com. Then you've got your username that you'll put in, and then your password for that web page. You then got a number of connections. So Thunder News gives me 8 connections. So, you know, some of them you'll see this UseNet Farm when we go into the show details. That gives me 50 connections. You won't need all of them. I mean, I've got gigabit, and I'm already saturated with only 8 connections, so it is very fast. Now, the one thing you'll see here, we've got this one set as priority 0. And then we've got our backup. I've got this set as priority 99. And you essentially set the lower number toward your unlimited account, and the higher number, I mean, you could set this as 1 if you wanted to. I just set it as 99 just out of habit to be my backup Usenet provider. And you can see I've only got 4 gigabytes of traffic that's actually transferred on my backup account. So, you know, if you wanted to click test, you can click test. It'll do its thing. Connection successful. That's how you know that you are actually getting where you need to go. And you can do that for your primary unlimited again and your block backup account. All right, now that we got all that good login stuff hidden again, you can see it gives you a nice total. So I transferred 1.2 terabytes from my unlimited block in the last 4 or 5 days here. So you can really hammer that unlimited when you're actually going out there and searching new content. And 4 gigabytes of missing articles were actually collected from that backup block. And that really helps prevent a bunch of failed downloads. If something gets like a DRM request and they have to remove like one little snippet of an article, you can then get that from the backup block. Okay, now that we've got our NewsNab downloader set up, there's only a couple more things we got to do in here. So once our servers are set up, we just have to go over to the Categories tab, and you'll see I just have this set up just about the same way that it will be stock, except I added this bottom one here, so you can add a new one. I have a separate list for my 4K movies. So we'll go over what to do there. But you essentially just need to, one at a time, just set the folder where you want the, I call it the active downloads to go. And this is mainly because there will occasionally be kind of like orphaned jobs that don't download quite right and they just kind of hang out somewhere. So by default, this puts them in a weird spot that's not easy to access. So since we've got our already shared media location, since we did that SMB share earlier, and we can just go down to our network, hit Truenas, go media, just add a couple of folders here. So add one called active downloads, and then add one called movies, music, and TV. We'll go over why you want to do all that later. But just add them now that we've got those shares set up. And then you're just going to set all of these download paths to media/active download. You have to save them one at a time, otherwise it's super annoying. If you change all of them at once and then you hit save on one line, it gets rid of the rest of your changes. So just do them one at a time for your movies, your TV, your default, and your movies 4K if you're going to get into that, but we can handle a whole 4K session in a little bit. So once you've got those categories added, the only other thing that you're going to have to do is locate your API key. So we're going to go on this top left general tab here, and I've got mine blocked out here, but you'll have an API key that's 30 characters long. So you just select that and copy that to your clipboard, and we'll go over why you're going to do that in just a second. Now that we've got SAB fully set up and running, the next thing we're going to do, we're just going to start with Radarr. So you're going to do the same thing. You're going to go to Discover Apps. You're going to type in Radarr, R-A-D-A-R-R. You're going to install an instance of that. So we're going to go over, I'm just going to click on Edit. It gives you the same options when you're fully setting it up. And it's really just the same exact thing. You don't have to do a darn thing until you get all the way down to additional app storage. You're going to go to host path, and you're going to define where you want the app storage to be. So again, you're going to select that media tab, and then you're going to do your mount path of /media. You're going to save that, launch it, and when it eventually comes up, it'll add to your list here. You can highlight it, and then you'll click open. When you select open, it'll pull up the default port is 7878, but again, you can set those to whatever you want. So from here, we've got to go into settings. First thing you want to do is go to media management. You want to tell it to rename your movies. Then depending how OCD you are, you can go down the whole rabbit hole of how to name these with the release year and the full quality and however you want that to look. But the important thing here is you've got to add a root folder. So this is why we did it in Windows Explorer, because you can't actually create a new folder here. So when you click add a root folder, it'll give you all of this garbage, and then here, here's that built-in lowercase media. The uppercase M media, this is the one that we created that share on, and we just told it that's where we want that share to point to, as uppercase M and media. So you can select that, and then you've got all of those subfolders that you selected in here. So you just click movies, and then once that's there, you'll just hit OK, and that will be shown here as your default path to download things to. The next down under settings are profiles. For my base instance of Radarr, I don't mess with that. I go right down to quality. And now I'm trying to force this server to be everything 265. So my old setups, it was .264, which is a lot easier for devices to stream to. But with the processing power that I have, I'm just kind of experimenting now. I want to force everything to be .265 files as much as I can. So I am setting my my quality limits down really, really low. So I'm saying for all of my 1080 stuff, I want that, and you got two here. You've got your preferred size, and then you've got your maximum size for each file. So I've got my preferred size. I just drag those sliders down to 1.6 gigabytes per hour, and then I've got my maximum size set at 3.5 gigabytes per hour. And that should make sure that I don't end up with any of those ridiculous Blu-ray rips that are 50 and 60 and however, like huge files just for a single movie. So my old server, before I had these set up, you'd tell it, yeah, just unlimited, and you'd end up with just these monster files that are so large it's trying to direct play, but then your network can't keep up with it because it's just such a huge file. So make sure you drag all these sliders down to what's appropriate for you. Again, I did 1.6 and 3.5 for all my 1080 stuff. I lowered the 2160p stuff, but I actually request all of my 4K stuff on a different instance of Radarr, and again, we'll go over that in just a bit. My 720p content I have set at 1 gigabyte per hour as my preferred size, and 2 gigabytes per hour as my maximum size there. Next, to help force that 265, you can go to Custom Formats, and you'll click the plus here. You can name it, so you'll name it as .x265, whatever you want to call it. You'll have to hit plus sign for the conditions, and then you've got a whole bunch of presets in here. The top one you want here is release title. You'll click on the presets, and they've already got an X265. And this funky looking syntax here, that's just so that it collects everything, whether it's X or H, and then the dot or the backslash, and then the 265 or HEVC. It'll include all of that when it's searching for releases to make sure that you get those 265s. Check the required box. That way it will be required to look for that first. It doesn't mean it's not going to download stuff that doesn't have it. It just means that when I search for a title, it's going to search for the .265, and if it can't find that, then it'll fall back to the .264s. You'll hit save. I'm going to hit cancel here because I've already got it established. And then the way to check on any of that is if you go back to profiles. If I go to my HD profile, you can click on that and you can see that it already pulled that in, that custom format, and that score of 0. And again, the lower the number, the higher the priority. So it's gonna look for that first if you just want to confirm that it's in your quality profiles. All right, so we did media management, profiles, quality, custom formats, now down to indexers. We're not going to hit indexers now because we've got a separate R program called Prowlarr where we can enter in our indexers just because it's kind of a lot of API keys and all that nonsense. We're going to enter that once, and that's going to go into Radarr, Sonarr, your second Radarr if you have one set up for 4K, your Lidarr. It'll go everywhere you need it to, and then as you update those, if you ever do, it'll automatically inject them in there. So then the next thing we got to do is go to download clients. So this is where you're going to add that instance of SAB. So your Radarr is going to search for the movies through your indexer or your search engine, and then that search engine is going to tell it to go to SABnzbd. So that's your download client. I hope that makes sense. So when you set this up, you're going to click on it. All you need to do is tell it your host path. So again, my server is set up as 192.168.29.30, and then the port for SAB is 10,097 on my instance. You can have that set to whatever. You're going to paste that API key in that I just showed you how to copy, or where to copy that from. And then here is important. So for your first instance, you're going to have this categories as just movies. If you have a separate instance for movies 4K, you're going to put that category of movies 4K or whatever you called it in SAB, and that's going to make sure that it keeps those separated and pulls them to the right place. You can then test it. You'll get that green check mark if everything's going well. and then apply or save. I'm just going to hit cancel because I've already got it set up. So that's that. The connections, once we get further down in the list and you have Plex and Jellyfin set up, you're going to want to connect it so that every time you add a movie, it reaches back out to your Plex server or your Jellyfin server and it says, hey, yeah, I got a new movie, update the list. So that's very much one and the same. You know, you just tell it where to go. The nice one with the Plex is you can authenticate with plex.tv. And again, you can do your test. It'll come back with a check mark once everything's kosher. And then every time you get new media, it'll reach back out and it'll tell your media playback servers that you've added new content. It'll show up on your home pages. All right, so we've got Radarr out of the way. Now Sonarr. So you want to do the same thing with TV. So this is going to start to look very redundant. You're going to go up to Discover Apps. You're going to type Sonarr. You're going to find it. You're going to see you've got the Truenas version or the TrueCharts version. You're going to click Install, which is going to get you to the very same looking install screen. And again, all you've got to change is going down and adding that additional app storage, host path, tell it that you want to go to that media share that you've set up before, and tell it to go to /media. So once that's set up, it'll deploy. You can hit open, which will bring up your Sonarr. And then again, very redundant, we're going to go through the same steps that we just did for Radarr. So you're going to go to media management, scroll down to the bottom, you're going to add your root folder, except this time it's going to be /TV because this is where you want your TV series to go to. You're going to tell it you want to do the renaming. You're going to jump over profiles again, go down to quality. You are going to set your quality sliders to where you want. So I'm not downloading any 4K TV at the moment, so I am sticking with just the 720 and the 1080. Now this is a little bit different, so you've got your preferred and maximum, but this will again automatically change based on the time or the length of the show that you are downloading. So I have mine set super low, so I have for every hour of content, my preferred size is 1 gigabyte for any of the 1080 content, with a maximum of 3.5 gigs. And again, it's just a personal preference, and I'm trying to force that .265 just to have much smaller files. I don't mind my server doing a lot of the work, and I want to be able to eventually store a ton of content here. So once you've got your quality sliders set up to where you want them, custom formats will do the same exact thing. We're going to add that 265. So we're going to go 265, required, save it. And then once that's saved, then we'll go to profiles and we'll verify that it's in there as 265 and required with the 0. Indexers, same thing. We're not going to touch the indexers because they are all automatically imported by Prowlarr, and they are doing a great job there. Download client, we're going to add SAB. So again, we're going to add that, paste in that API key, just like we did in the Radarr section a little bit earlier. And then connect. We didn't get to these parts yet with the Plex Media Server and the Jellyfin, but this is where you're going to add those connections there as well. So now that we're through movies and TV, music and books are literally exactly the same thing. So you've got your Lidarr and your Readarr that I haven't completely set up the reader yet, but Lidarr's exactly the same way, so I'm not going to beat that to death. But you're just going to add them, launch them, and go through those same steps, adding the root folder, adding the SAB link, verifying that the indexers port over. So I think the more important thing to focus on here now is moving over to Prowlarr, since we've mentioned that 4 or 5 times. So you're going to install Prowlarr, do the same exact thing. So when you launch this, oh, even easier. This one, I forgot, we don't even need to add storage for, because it's not actually accessing anything. It's just you launch it and that's it. So once we have it installed, we'll go over to open, and this is where you're going to add your indexers. So indexers are like your search engine. NZBgeek is probably 95% of what my hits actually come back for that are valid and good. Now, it is a paid for service. I think it was $60 for a lifetime. And you know, a lot of these, this is probably the trickiest part. So setting up your Thunder News and your UseNet farm, your actual downloaders, or your NewsNab servers is probably easier to get into than any of these search engines. So sometimes they have a wait list, or you've got to have a refer a friend. You know, the process is the same though. So I've got a couple on here that are free, and then NZBgeek is my main paid for one that's absolutely fantastic. So to add any of these, you click on the add button. You can either search for them, or you can say, you know, I just am looking for NZBs, and at least this will show you a list of what's available. So the majority of the good ones are going to be private. So this is probably the hardest part, where you're going to have to go out and you're going to have to actually find an indexer to be able to ping against like a search engine to find your content that you're looking for, to tell it which articles to download from your UseNet provider. And I'm sorry that's about as clear as mud, but that's about the best I can do in this section, because everybody's is going to be different. So we'll go into NZBgeek here just to show you. I'm going to click the edit screen. It's got my API blanked out, but essentially you'll have a URL that it goes to, and you'll have the same kind of thing. You'll have that API key that allows it to communicate. So you will add that API key, you'll name it, you'll hit test. You'll get that green check mark down there at the bottom that lets you know that everything's going okay, and you'll hit save. Again, I'm just going to hit cancel here because I've already got these. So once you've got an index, or at least one, you know, you can add these other freebie ones or whatever's free at the time in that list. Then all you've got to do is go to your settings, and you've got to add apps. So this is where I have added my Radarr instance, my Radarr 4K instance, and my Sonarr instance. So you'll open each one of those, and all you've got to do is tell it what server to go to. So on mine, I had to define what the Prowlarr server was. It would always just say localhost, but localhost wasn't working for me on any of these. I actually had to physically type in the IP of my server with the port here. So again, my server's on 29.30, and this Prowlarr is on 96.96, and I had to point to the Radarr server of 78.78. Now, there's also an API key in Radarr, in Sonarr, in whatever you're connecting. So to get to that, you've got to go into your general tab, and it'll have the API key in there. You'll copy that, paste it in here, and again, you hit that test button at the bottom, and then save, and it'll add to the list. And just so you can see that API key, I'm going to go back over to Radarr. Again, in your settings, general, you're going to have your API key here, and you can click the copy button there and then just paste it back over in your setup of Prowlarr, and that'll allow them to communicate back and forth, and it really saves a lot of time injecting all of that, because these search engines will change over time, or these indexers will change over time. It's just a nice, easy way to update all of those all at once. Okay, so now that we're done with Prowlarr, we're getting quite a handful of applications installed. You're going to say, how am I supposed to remember to get to any of these things? And that's where homearr comes in. So again, discover apps, search for homearr, Homarr, install that. You need to do absolutely zero to get that up and running. You'll open it, and once it opens, you kind of get a beautiful home screen here that's really customizable. So you just have to go into the edit mode, and then you can either add a tile, or I've got all of mine already set up here. You can edit any of these. So you just name it. It'll automatically pull a PNG image to put on top of the tile. Now I did notice that it's a little quick. So when you are adding a name, it wants to search. If you hesitate for a second, it'll search. Let's just add a new one. So we're going to add a name. We're going to add Radarr. So if you kind of hesitate for a second and you've only got RAD, it already picked what it thought was the best icon for that. So you may have to eventually go over to appearance and then just clear that out. And then type in Radarr and select one, and then it'll give you the right icon. It's awesome that it's trying to find you an image super fast. I just wish it hesitated another half a second, just because it seemed like every single one of mine, it was picking the wrong icon unless I could really just super fast type in what the name of it was. Then your internal and external address, you are going to essentially copy and paste in from each of your services. So, again, mine's 192.168.29.30 : and then the 4-digit or 5-digit port number. So for each of those, you're going to just put that in both locations. And then the important part here is you've got to get out of the edit mode. Otherwise, it won't save any of your changes. So you exit the edit mode, and you can move these all around everywhere you want. And you'll see you'll have quite a bit of things when we're done with this full install here, but it's a nice home page that you can just immediately go into whatever front end application you want. So if you want to go into something we've already set up, like the Sonarr, you just click that. It opens up a new tab here, and just shows us exactly what we were looking for. I've got my WLED instances even set up on here, so you can do that. It'll load you right into the WLED integration that I have. So it's a really nice and easy one-stop shop dashboard. You no longer have to add bookmarks to all your different stuff. You can just add one bookmark to your Homarr dashboard. So that's a really great integration that I absolutely love. Okay, so now that we've got that out of the way, let's move over to our media players. And I say players plural because I love Plex. Absolutely love it. With the exception that if and when our internet goes down, I cannot play the media that is sitting right on the floor next to me. That drives me absolutely bonkers. So we're going to set up Plex, and then we're going to have Jellyfin as our emergency backup. I've got everything on a UPS, including the TV, so we could have power outage for 4 or 5 hours, and everything will be fine, and we could still watch TV. We could still watch a movie if we want to. We won't be able to pop any popcorn, but it's not a totally dead night where we're playing board games under candlelight. But I cannot use Plex because it has to authenticate through the Plex server before it'll let me play my own darn media. So we'll go through, we'll do Plex and then Jellyfin. They're both very, very similar. So again, discover apps, you'll search for Plex, you'll hit the install, and everything's going to be fine. You will have to get a claim token from Plex. It walks you through that, how to add that claim token if you're a Plex Pass user. And again, the only other thing you've got to do is you've got to add that additional storage so that it can find the media that you've got on your server. So this one's a little backwards. It has mount path first and then what the host path is, but the host path is the same thing we've been setting up for the last 20 minutes here, and it's just wherever you're storing that media that we defined in that data set up above. So if you're mimicking my flow, it's just going to be mount, whatever you called your pool, and then whatever you called your data set, which I've called media. Mounted as \media in this app. So once that's set up, you can just launch that from the web portal, and it'll be your regular Plex login and credentials. Jellyfin is handled just about the same exact way. So when you are adding your instance of Jellyfin, you don't need to mess with any of these top settings at all. And that's kind of the benefit of Truenas versus Proxmox that I struggled with for days trying to get everything to work. Is all you have to do is go in for each and every one of these and add the additional app storage of your host path with your mounted data set location, and then call it \media. Everything else just works. So now you've got your Plex and your Jellyfin, and there's more setup involved in those with having actual counts and that. But once you're in there, you just point it towards your TV shows folder, your movies folder, your music folder, whatever you want to set up, and you're good to go in there. So next we've got our media requestrrs. So I've got two of those. One is called requestrr and one is called Overseerr. So what requestrr does is it ties to your Discord account. And this is really convenient for quickly requesting new movies or TV shows. If somebody's talking to you at work and you're like, oh, that sounds really good, I want to add that. You can pull up Discord on your phone. You can say \request TV, and then you can add the title of the TV show, and it will add it to your instance of Sonarr or Radarr. So requestrrs, kind of a pain in the butt to set up, but they've got a really great wiki that walks you all the way through it. So once you have this launched, you've got to then add a bot and the whole 9 yards. I'm not going to do a step-by-step on this one just because they have a really good step-by-step wiki. So I'll post that link down below. Overseerr is great for family members at home and or you. I mean, I particularly like Overseerr because it's got a really great kind of discovery function that Radarr and Sonarr used to have that worked great, but they've been kind of lacking. I don't know if it's because Overseerr does such a good job or what, but again, same thing. You go to Discover Apps, you'll add it. Let's check and see if this one needed any extra storage. I don't think it did, but maybe it did. Yep, so we added that additional app storage host path, and we did to the mount point and media. And once you launch this, it's really just a beautiful layout of how you want to add things. So there's not much set up on the back end, but once it's set up in here, that's where you've got to add your services. So in Overseerr, you've got to add your default Radarr, and then it actually is smart enough to say, hey, I know that managing 4K content and regular high def or standard def content is kind of a pain in the butt. I don't want to share any of my 4K content with people that's outside of the home, just because it's larger files. It's a lot of processing power that I don't want everybody just having free willy access to full-blown transcodes from 4K down to something that they can watch on their phone at the train station or whatever. Like, I don't want people making those terrible decisions and really crushing my server to do that. So I have them set up for 4K when I am in the house, and everything else on its own separate dedicated thing, and I just kind of limit the access in Plex for that. You can do the same thing for Sonarr, and there's, again, API keys involved in all of that back and forth. But once you have those set up, it's a really great flow. Okay, so now that we're talking 4K instance versus traditional instance, this is where the majority of my issues were, and probably the majority of your issues are if you're kind of following along with this. So you can see here we've got the two different ports. We've got 7878 set up for our default, and we've got 7879 set up for our 4K. So if I click in the edit for these, again, you're going to need to copy and paste that API key from your particular instance, put it in here. You'll see that this root folder is defined as media movies. If we go into the 4K instance, you'll see it's media movies -4K. So once that's set up, we've got our two instances of Radarr. So this is my 4K instance. And right now I'm looking at the connection to our downloader, because this is where it gets tricky, because you've got two separate instances of Radarr, both sending files to one instance of SAB, and you've got to make sure that it's putting those files in the right folder. Otherwise, you'll have all your content just ending up in your movies folder. So to do this, you've got to name a category. So this category, movies-4K with no spaces in there, has to be the same as is in our SAB category. So in the very beginning of this, we set up that movies-4K with no spaces as its own separate category. And that's what defines what's going where. So if we look at our regular instance, its category defaulted as movies. So that's why we have this separate category of movies. So it's still sending them all to active downloads, but our settings in Radarr then are telling it where to actually save it based on our media management and our root folder path. So everything with the category of regular movies is going to get placed back into this movies folder, because that's where our media management tab told it on our regular instance. And on our 4K instance, everything with the movies-4K category is going to go back to our media movies 4K folder, if that makes any sense. And that's the only thing that differentiates where your files are getting saved. And that did take me a hot minute to figure out and get set up appropriately. But if you just kind of mimic my setup, you should be good to go in no time. Now, moving back over to Overseerr, which is where we started, this beautiful layout. So I absolutely love the Discover tab. So you can just kind of scroll in here through trending, through popular movies, through whatever. So if you wanted to add a movie, you literally, you can either click on it, or you can click the request that's right here. It'll ask you what profile you want to select it from. I just kind of have the default anything HD as the default here. I'm not going to do that because I do want to go into this movie to show you. You can click request or request in 4K. And the cool part is, if you just click regular request, yeah, I want to request this as kind of a default. Boom. That's already a request. You can then request it additionally in 4K. and it'll send over to your other instance of Radarr. So now you'll have two different requests, one in each instance of Radarr, in your standard high def and in your ultra high def, if that makes any sense. So again, you can set up different users and everything for this. I just have, essentially my wife has access to this now, where if she wants to add anything, she can just search it up in here and add it. Or if we get bored, you can go through and you can scroll. It's cool because you can do by studio, you can do by genre, or you can just type in and find it. So it's really great for that discovery of new content. If somebody's bored or wants to request something, again, great inside the home. All right, now over to one of my favorites, and that is photo backups. So I originally wanted to be able to do easy-ish photo backups just because, I don't want to pay for iCloud photo backups of $5 a month or whatever that's up to. And even if you do, it's nice to have kind of an off-site backup. So I was originally looking through, and I had set up this photo prism, and then I was about to spend $25 on a one-time licensing fee for an app that would push those to photo prism. And that would have worked just fine. I think people are fine with it. But I discovered this new one called Immich, Immich, and it is fantastic. So same thing, you go to search for it, add it, and then the only difference with this is you're going to need to create a bunch of extra folders on your storage drive. So when you get in here, I just created a folder called Immich Backups, and then I created all of these file folders that it asks for. Some of them it doesn't let you choose. I just didn't clean it up. But essentially, it's a photo database. So everywhere where you can say, we'll go through here. So our host configuration, our host path, we have so this is where it got weird. So your library storage. So this is point one where you've got to define. So I pointed that towards that folder that I created called library. Your thumb storage, your thumbnails. So it's going to create a small thumbnail, a large thumbnail, and a blurred thumbnail for each and every photo that you back up. So I have that pointed towards that Immich backups thumbs. Profile storage. So see how it won't let you do anything here? That's going to be contained in the app. So I didn't need that profile folder that I created. The video storage, it let me select as host. So I could point that towards that Immich backups profile. And the Postgres, it doesn't let you change. So whatever Postgres data storage is, you just leave that as it was. And then you add your additional storage so that you can physically transfer the files from your phone over to the storage path that you want. So again, I have mine as the mount path of /photos, and I pointed that towards the Immich backups subset. So this is where your actual files are going to go. Once you've got those 4 or 5 files defined, you can launch it and then go to the App Store and download the companion app for your phone called Immich. And I'll switch cameras over here so you can get a feel for what that looks like. Okay, so here's the companion app on my iPhone. So you'll have to set up an account through Immich. So it's just an email and a password the first time that you physically launch it on your web portal here. So you'll pull it up on your web portal and it will say, create an account. So you'll enter your email and a password as the administrator. And then just take note of the port that it was installed on. So this is 30041. And then when you open up your app, you'll put in your username, your password, and then you'll sign into the actual server. So once that's up and running, you can go to the top right icon there, which is backup. And from here, you'll select the album that you want to backup. So you will hit select, say recents or whatever you physically want to back up, and then it'll automatically do its thing. So here's my wife at the dentist. There's some food. There's a Fire and Ice Festival with our kids. And you'll see the icon will change to the cloud with a check mark on it as it actually backed up. So you can go in and you can tell it to back up when it is idle, when it's charging, in the background, in the foreground, all sorts of fun settings. So if you go into settings, so I've got it to automatic foreground backup is on and automatic background backup is on, only when it's on Wi-Fi. You can say only when charging. So if you wanted to, hey, I'm just going to leave this app open in the background, obviously, but then every time I put my phone on the charger at night, it'll do its background thing and it'll do it then. So it's really nice the way that it just kind of functions, and the search functions are fantastic. So I'm going to switch back over to the web portal version just to show you some of the features there. All right, so here we are back in the web portal. So you can see it categorizes everything kind of on a timeline, just like Google Photos does. So you can go back in time at any point in which you want. Then you can go explore, and it identifies people through its facial recognition. So you've got to go through and you've got to name some people, but then it'll kind of bundle them all together. It pulls out places. So if I wanted to go back to Bethany Beach here and relive the first time that my son saw Bewbs, we can do that. It's really cool. You can then go to the map and you can see, all of the places where you're taking photos. So you can see, I'm in Central PA. So the majority of my photos are, boom, Central PA. But you can see, oh, cool. You were down in the Dominican Republic. You were over in Louisiana here. Oh, you were up in Vermont. Oh, you were over in Connecticut or wherever that was. You can see and you can kind of zoom in just like you can on anything else. So it's really neat. It pulls over all your albums, all your favorites. And again, you can trash stuff on here. It gives you your storage gauge. Another cool thing, you can go over to administration and you can see your users and you can allot them a quota. So, I gave my wife a 4 terabyte quota, which may or may not be enough for her. She takes a lot of pictures. So we'll see. But it is some nice features and it'll keep everyone's data separate. You can tell if it's got any jobs running in the background, so you can see when it's generating thumbnails, doing the metadata, doing the face detection. So as we were uploading 10,000 pictures yesterday, the server was going nuts. It was doing all sorts of its fun activities, but it even converts your live images into little movie clips and a base photo. So you can still view the base photo and then you can hover over it and it'll still play the movie clip. Because not everything has that same functionality that iPhone does with its HEIC compression and all that jazz. So it does all the work in the background to make this as flexible as possible. So this was the best find for our use case, and the one that I am most excited about is this Immich software, and it seems to be very, very intensely updated. So I mean, I've had it up and running for 3 or 4 days now, and it's getting a new update constantly, and they're always adding stuff. So I'm really excited to see that it's highly supported under vigorous development, and it's only going to get better. So that's my key find of this server build. Okay, now that we've got that covered, let's go back for our last little bit, and that is going to be Tailscale. So Tailscale is a really unique, I'm going to call it a VPN. I don't know exactly how it works, but it's free, and it gives you secure access to your server. So it's super quick and easy to set up if you follow this. So I struggled with this a little bit, had to watch a couple of videos, so I'm going to put this all in one place for you here. When you are installing your instance of Tailscale, there's an auth key that you have to get from the physical Tailscale web page. So you'll copy and paste that in there once you set up your account. Give it a host name. The route, so my network is 192.168.29, and my router's at .1, you know, like everybody's is. You've got to do whatever your beginning of your IP address is, .0, and then do a /24. And that essentially says you're going to open it up to everything that's on that network. You've then got to select authorize exit node and user space. So this will allow you to, when you are on your phone, you'll pull it up and it'll act like you are actually here, and you can access all of your apps. So you can access your Radarr dashboard, your Sonarr dashboard, your homearr dashboard, whatever you want to look at, you'll be able to be just like you're at home without having to risk exposing anything through port forwarding or any of that crap. It just works flawless. So once you've got those two checked and you make sure your IP address is correct, come down here. There's one more checkbox. You've got to check host network, and that's what really ties it back. Even though if you click the little question mark here, it says not to do it, you have to do it. Otherwise, it won't act like you are on the network with your phone. Hit save, and then I'll bring you guys over to the actual their webpage. So we'll go over what to do there. Okay, once you're on tailscale.com and you are logged in to your admin portal, you'll see your Truenas Scale instance. I don't know if I've got to blur out these addresses, but I am anyway, whatever. You'll see if you did everything right, it'll say subnets and exit node. You've got to go over to the little kebab menu over here, and you've got to hit edit route settings. And then you've just got to make sure that you select those to use as an exit node and to hit those subnet routes. So you'll hit save, and then those little exclamation marks will go away next to exit node and subnets. And you can see here I've got my phone authorized as well, and it's not showing up as connected because I'm not currently on the VPN. But I will switch over to my phone so you can see what that app looks like and how easy it is to physically connect. So here you can see it'll walk you through the setup. It'll make you do the VPN settings and all that jazz, but it's a really straightforward, you just authorize it, it'll set up the VPN, and then to connect it, once you are in the Tailscale app, it literally is just toggling on that button on the top left to connect to your VPN. And if you can see up at the top, I've got my Wi-Fi off, so you know that I am on the cellular network. You can see my Truenas Scale instance and my phone are active there. So now in order to connect to this, if you copy that IP address and paste it in there, you can see I can connect to my Truenas. So if you want to log in, here we are, we're logged in, and it's just like I'm sitting at home. You can then go to apps. It will pull your application list just like I'm at home. You know, if we wanted to go to our Homarr dashboard, boom, just like I'm at home. You can sign in, do everything just like you are at home, but you can be anywhere in the world through VPN. So that's going to open up a lot of possibilities. And again, you don't have to worry about exposing everything to the internet. So I'm not an expert on this. I don't expect a lot of you are. I'm sure there's a ton of people out there that are way smarter than me that'll tell me I shouldn't post certain numbers here. So I'm going to try to block everything out as best I can. But it just gets everything to work without having to open up your entire network to vulnerabilities there. So that concludes this walkthrough of my server. Again, it took me probably, I want to say under 3 hours to get this thing set up, from writing the disk image onto a USB drive to physically up and running with a lot of these services. Now, of course, there was some tinkering in there, but if you follow this guide, you should be able to do it, I don't know, hour and a half, just to get everything functioning. And I think that this is going to be the use case for a lot of people. You're going to want to be able to have your network attached storage, and you're going to want at least some of these services here. You might not want every single service that is on my list, but at least now you can have your photo backups, or you can have your Plex, or your basic Radarr and Sonarr set up. But with this is kind of everything that I need this server to do, and it was just far, far easier on Truenas than anything else I've ever used. So I've been using Truenas for a while, back when they called everything jails. So I switched from jails to containers to now it's Kubernetes. I don't even want to know. I don't even want to look into it because I don't have to anymore. They have taken this to the level of it's iPhone easy to be able to compare it to anything. It literally is install the apps, assign the storage is probably the hardest part, but once you understand what's going on there, it's not that hard. And everything just works. So I hope you guys found some value in there. If there's anything else you want me to touch base on or hit a little bit more in depth, please let me know. Until next time, like and subscribe. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you.